bit. Listen, the Army's messed me up in a way that nobody else could.
Yeah, we're live, so.
Yep. Hello.
Alright, how we doing, everybody? Let me quickly add this to the Discord because I know people don't have their freaking notifications on. So if you don't have notifications on, turn notifications on because I'm getting tired of sending y'all this link in Discord. Let me copy the link. Alright. But yeah, how you guys doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. We just got done with the crypto party and that was, it was all good.
Gotcha.
Yes. I learned about GPG or PGP encryption today, which is awesome.
There you go.
For those, we will be posting the write-up for, the PGP encryption and going through that process. So we also do have a list of everybody in the server. We're just posting our public keys there. So if you guys want to, if you missed that event while you're in the server, catch up afterwards. We've got the full write-up. You can share your key there too and start sending encrypted messages if you want.
There you go. But yeah, we should be good now. Everybody's been pinged and cool. I like that word, pinged. Oh yeah. But nah, we just been chilling. Hi Cosmo, hey, what's up, Dev Dan? I like the name.
What's up?
Elite, hey yo, it's me NX. Hey, what's good? I like the name Elites. It's like 13, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 33, 7.
Okay. So I guess where do we start? We got everybody here.
Yeah, I know. So first of all, there's a new face on the podcast for here today. If you want to introduce yourself, Nightshade.
Hey everybody, my name is Nightshade on the Discord server. Real name because I have nothing to hide. NSA can strike me down whenever they want. My name is Bakari. I was a developer for a few years, working at a couple different companies, and I just took my time and transitioned over to cybersecurity. I mainly am focused on malware development and network security. So yeah, I'm pretty active on the Discord server. Definitely reach out if I don't respond within a few minutes. Just give me some time. Eventually I'll respond because I like to help people learn because
Oh yeah.
I love hacking.
He's dropped some crazy stuff in this Discord server and has, taught me quite a bit too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, God knows what he's doing for sure.
God and Jesus. But nah, we just been chilling. I guess I'll talk about what I've been up to. Cause yeah, I went dark. I went quiet. Cause I had food poisoning earlier this week, which was super fun. It felt like someone kicked you in the stomach and then it just kind of sat there. Or you just had a really bad night out with a really obese person. But I think no, morbid, more. No, I'm playing. Before cancel culture attacks me, let's go ahead and keep going. But nah, yeah, so that was killer. And then I got better, but I was like, let me deep dive, work on the company. For those of you who don't know, Cosmodium CS isn't just a YouTube channel, it's a company, a cybersecurity education company. And I was like, you know what? We need money. So I was like, let's make a site plan. So that's what we did. We made the Happy Hacker site plan, which is basically a exclusive plan for members of the website. If you guys want to check it out, I'll leave the link here. Actually, I probably can show you guys. Hold on. Let's see if I can do this right. Wow, I did it right. There you go. Hold on, let me do F11 real quick on this, just so that way you guys can see it better. But yeah, so this is our support page, right? There's the Happy Hacker plan. I'll go ahead and make it a little bit bigger if you guys want to check that out. There you go. Right, so it's $1 a month if you guys want to go ahead and support us. It's only $1 a month for not asking for much. But it does come with a bunch of cool stuff. So you guys eventually will get exclusive courses, videos, articles, and resources. right now, you guys do have access to exclusive videos. So some of my deleted content, some of the other stuff, if you guys want to check out those exclusive videos, as well as access to our knowledge base, which is basically a giant library of security resources. So if you guys want to check that out, you guys can check that out as well. But yeah, only $1 a month if you guys want to support us and our mission. It is greatly appreciated. Otherwise, that's kind of what we've been up to, or at least what I've been up to. Yeah.
So before we get any further, I think there has been a challenge laid down in chat from Nix claiming to be the best hacker.
Ooh, no one's
So
better at hacking than me, though. That's all I'll say. 10-second WordPress reverse shell. For those of you who don't know, Elite in the chat is our newest intern. He went through the evaluation process and is a killer hacker. Got a reverse shell in 10 seconds, so it was pretty sweet. Yeah.
it was kind of funny watching him. I stepped away for a drink after he finished the first flag and Mr. Robot. Thought I had enough time to go bottle water and come back, and by the time I stepped in, he was creating a netcat listener for his reverse shell that he already crafted in the, less than a minute it took me to walk to my kitchen, grab a bottle of water, come back in and sit down. That was pretty interesting to see.
Yeah.
But that was pretty good. Since we only got a limited amount of time with our guest here, Nisha, you want to talk a little bit about this proof of concept if you can, or just, start geeking out with the malware stuff? I'd definitely love to hear some of the stuff you've been working on. I think the other people would too.
Absolutely. So, for the community, for the Cosmodium community, I've been working on a project called the Kill Chain. It's on my GitHub. I posted in the Discord server. So if you guys have not joined Cosmodium's Discord server, please jump in there and check it out. Try to provide as much good content as I can. The Kill Chain is basically an adversarial simulation. It is an adversarial simulation that is modified from a set of tools that I personally used out in the field. And I try to keep it up to date. I'm a little bit behind on my schedule of trying to keep it updated because I've just had a lot of personal stuff going on with work, but definitely stay tuned. I'm going to keep it up to date. So what this kill chain is, this repository is basically an end-to-end walkthrough of how would you, as an adversary playing the role of a bad guy, right? Like, if I am a malicious hacker and I'm trying to get into some system that I'm authorized to test, of course, how would I go about right? You have to have the disclaimer. So how would I go about doing it? What tools would I use? What would my thought process be? What are the techniques? And the whole reason why we do adversarial simulations is basically to emulate the effects of or the tactics, techniques, and procedures of real organizations out in the wild. It's one thing to test with a custom framework like Metasploit or like Cobalt Strike, and it's another thing to actually use the techniques and the procedures that an adversary is going to use in the wild, where they're writing all custom tools, they're using all custom techniques, and they have specific goals in place. So regarding what Matsu just asked about, I am working on a current project where it kind of relates to the kill chain repository that I talked about, because again, I'm working right now on an adversarial simulation in real life, and I'm hitting a wall where the particular language I'm using is Golang. And for those of you who are not familiar with Golang, it is a statically compiled programming language where basically you don't need to have any dependencies on a target computer. It will produce a binary, which is native code, that has all of the dependencies in it. So once you compile a Go binary, you can just run it on your target. And I could develop it on Mac, I could even compile it on Mac, and I could specify that I want it to be like, a Windows binary, and I can do that no problem.
Gotcha.
The only downside is Go produces massive binaries, And yes, a large part of that is due to the fact that every single Go binary that is compiled includes the Go runtime. And Go runtime is, can't get around that. So the problem I'm having with my particular use case out in the wild is that this binary I have produced, which is a fully featured custom post-exploitation tool, so something similar to like Interpreter, if you're familiar, I'm trying to embed it in a Microsoft document using macros, of course, and I'm having trouble because the binary is just too big. And for some of you experts out there, you're probably going to say, well, why are you trying to put a Go binary inside of a Microsoft Word document? Well, I'm actually embedding the shellcode for this Go binary inside of a C# application, and the C# application is being run by the macro.
Gotcha.
Anyone make sense? Any questions?
You using CodeCase?
Yes, go for it.
So, with Microsoft kind of tightening up their security with macros and everything, obviously if you download a document nowadays that has a macro, it would kind of broadcast on the top, hey, this has macros, enable the ability to use the macros. Are you doing anything to bypass this, or is this simply just for the proof of concept?
Well, yeah, so that's a great question. Given the way that the security has been implemented into Microsoft Office and the operating system, there's no way really to get around the notification that you have macros installed. However, can use a process called macro stomping, and that is essentially a way to hide the source code of your macro. And it's a pretty advanced technique, not one that's talked about too much. I can even, thank you for asking that question, because I can add that to the kill chain repository so that people can get an understanding of how that technique works. But essentially, you would use that so that the reason why you would use macro stomping is not only because you want to basically decrease the size of your deployed, like Excel file or Word file that has it in there. You also it gives you a layer of obfuscation as well, and it also lowers your detection rates for antivirus. Because most adversaries out in the wild, they won't go the extra step of stomping the macro. So there's a lot of advantages to using that technique, and it's actually not even really that hard of a technique to do. There's lots of ways you can do it. It's pretty simple, but the big difficulty with the implementation I have right now is the fact that I am embedding the shellcode for my Go post-exploitation tool in the C# application, and then the C# application is being directly converted into a macro. So what I'm going to experiment with is I am going to try and make the macro dynamically call the C# application at runtime, and then have the C# application call the shell, load the shellcode into memory, my Go shellcode into memory, and then execute it. So we'll see how that goes.
Gotcha.
It sounds like what you're talking about with your kill chain, it feels like it would be a nice side dish to the living off the land type scenario, where you kind of just implement what's already built in, no extra tools, but this feels like a nice secondary stage if I am to implement something into that work.
That is exactly what we would be relying on. So the way that this particular implementation that I'm talking about works is it is taking some elements of living off the land. What it's specifically taking from living off the land is, after that initial macro executes, it will be relying on the .NET framework to run, to be on the target. And the .NET framework is going to be running my C# application, which will load my Go malware into memory and execute it. So if I am, for whatever reason, let's say my target has a restricted .NET environment that's closely monitored. Well, if my target is really paying attention to the .NET runtime, then boom, I'm busted. There's no possible way around it, because the using the C# application is my essential gateway in to the target. So yeah, it is living off the land.
It's a really cool program looking into it and everything. A real, I guess, real good collection of knowledge is the best way to put it. Is kind of what it sounds like. It's more like a repository, a game plan almost. It feels to me you're kind of rewriting the Red Team build kit a little bit.
Well, that's a little ambitious. I don't know that I'm necessarily trying to do that.
Not fully, but it feels like it's a more specialized version for those who have it or have looked into it. It gives you direct methods for average use cases inside of a network when it comes to Red Team. But it feels like you're definitely implementing that malware, off that same principle, what's already available.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole reason around, devising the kill chain as something for the community was, it's one thing to have like kind of the more like book kind of knowledge, like the abstract kind of knowledge, like, hey, I know that, if I need to get access, I would run these commands with my, I would set up a netcat listener, I would do this, I would send this interpreter shell onto the target. And there's another thing to kind of think through end to end, what does a compromise look like? And given no external tools, what is a way that I can implement an end-to-end kill chain on a target? And when I say kill chain, it's not like, something I made up. It's coming from Lockheed Martin, I believe's cyber kill chain.
Oh, gotcha.
So they essentially made this this cyber kill chain term. But anyway, so like, what does it look like to go from malicious document to complete compromise of a system? And the reason why I wrote this knowledge, I put this knowledge out there is because again, it's one thing to have like kind of the abstract knowledge, and then it's another thing to think through the process of exploitation from end to end, and to understand where you as like a malware developer or as a penetration tester, where you would add your custom tools, right? Because you could take the kill chain as I have it right now in the GitHub, even though it's not 100% finished, it's like probably like 95% finished, but you could take that knowledge and then you could substitute all of the tools that I have provided in the GitHub repository, and you could experiment with all custom tools, or you could experiment with all open source tools instead of using the reverse shell that I created in a programming language called NIM. You could take a interpreter shell and you could substitute that. You could look at the C# application that executes, well, in the example it's my reverse shell, but you could use again a interpreter. You could, well, what if I change, instead of using a C# application, what if I use a Visual Basic application instead? What if I, instead of using PowerShell here, what if I substitute and use this? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
that's the whole point around it, is to understand, one, going from no access to access, and two, having something that you can experiment with. So you could use Cosmodium's only rat. Like, you could literally take that and have that, instead of using the reverse shell, you could take only rat, you could throw that at the target, and
appreciate the plug. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. That's exactly why, we're designing this. Because again, it's about tactics, techniques, and procedures. It's not about specific tools.
Yeah.
And beyond that, though, although I'll give you the caveat, if you're going to be using only rat, because of how it's implemented, you would need to modify a few things within the kill chain. But you could still do it.
Right.
So it sounds like this is very much, let me teach you principles, not tools.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly what it is.
That's awesome. The whole thing. I think this is a great thing for the community, for them to have something like this, especially for those who are stepping into this. Yeah, they've done their time in help desk and network engineers, stepping into the security field for the first time and kind of getting to see these principles of what the actual engagement will look like.
Right.
Substitute whatever tools your organization prefers. If you got licenses for Burpsly Pro, go for it. Metasploit, go for it. Hit whatever you've got available, just substitute it for whatever these principles are. So apply generic situation 123 to tool whatever, and you've got a good combination right there.
Exactly. And when I devised the kill chain, I didn't do it in like a, it's not. I definitely referred to lots of other professional, like efforts and security researchers out there, and everything that I have referenced and that I used to help me build this kill chain out. Everything is linked in there, so there's lots of further information if there's specific things that don't make sense. There's lots of links to everything, and like you can see where I'm getting the information from. You can reach out to the people who have, essentially laid the foundation for specific areas of the kill chain that I implemented. And the actual kill chain itself is based off of an actual threat actor, TA505. And there's a lot. They have lots of different names. If you look them up, you'll get more information about them. They're a ransomware group, and they do ransomware, but usually they are more interested in like, hey, let's hack this bank so that we can initiate a bank transfer from their internal systems into account X. So like, these techniques that I'm giving in the kill chain are not like, just, hey, this guy thinks it's cool to do this. Like these are actual techniques that are used out in the wild. And again, that having been said, I feel like I need to give the caveat again. Don't be evil, guys. Don't run out and like throw interpreter and only right in there and just like start firing away. Remember the scope and the permissions for who you have to do these adversarial simulations with. It doesn't take much to set up a home lab where you can try these things out. And I think that's really the best thing you can do, right? You can set up some virtual machines that are running like Windows Defender and see if you can beat Defender. And like, again, the principles are what matter, not the tools.
I see this even being a huge, benefit for the blue team side too. I mean,
exactly.
You pretty much handed me a playlist of what people would try to attack my network with. How do I take this information you've given me, not only from the attack perspective, but from the defensive perspective? Cover these things. There's things I like to cover purple team. Do a little bit of attacking on my network to kind of tighten up afterwards. But there's certain attacks that I realistically can't do on my network. For one, it would potentially damage the production of the network and its functionality as it goes through. But also, just because I don't know everything about this. You've essentially kind of given us a better checklist than the standard stuff. Password policy is always something that can be tightened up on. That's always good. But there's attacks that I'm willing to bet that even with all the stuff I've done on my network for the last couple months, I probably would find stuff on that list and think, man, how did I never think about that?
Yeah, just specifically from the, and again, like, I'm not, some like god tier hacker, you know what I mean? Like I only know what I know. So these techniques that you're talking about, they're very specific in the example that I provided for the kill chain. So if you are a blue team, if you are on the blue team, if you're interested in, like that side of the house, what you can do is you can look at how the different examples that are provided, right? So I have two examples. I have a reverse shell that's written in NIM, the NIM programming language, and then I have like a more complete sort of like host exploitation tool, a Discord bot with Helga. And Helga, you could substitute Helga and you could see what Helga's trying to do, right? You could see the Windows 32 APIs that it's calling to try and do the low-level operating stuff that, like a threat actor would be interested in. And from the blue team perspective, you can say to yourself, well, hey, if I see open process, if I see create remote thread, if I see like if I see all of these Windows 32 APIs in quick succession being called, then that is a super red flag.
Right.
And I need to look at that. And that's exactly, again, why we provide this. So it's not only value for the red teamers, it's also value for the blue teamers. And that's another point. Like, the reason why I chose NIM as the base sort of like payload that I put on the target is because NIM is very stealthy. I think the security researcher, his name is Bytebleeder. He created this repository called Offensive NIM, and he pointed out in his repository that really the way that NIM works is it generates C code or C++ code, and then it compiles it down into native instructions for a machine. And the only way you'll know that it's a NIM payload is if you see the NIM main. If you like crack it open and look inside of it, you'll see like a NIM main function declared. And that would be the only way you would know that the particular binary you're looking at is a NIM malware. And when I was experimenting with this, I did find that Windows 11 is really scared now of NIM, and like you can't even download like the NIM compiler anymore. It assumes that the NIM compiler itself is malware.
Yeah.
Right. And Go had that problem prior to, well, not really prior to, but after like Go got really popular for malware. All of the security vendors basically signatured Go runtime as a virus, and so Docker went down and Terraform went down, and then they had to like remove all the signatures. They were like, holy cow. But no, NIM doesn't have that problem because there's not been a super successful program that enterprise uses in NIM. So, but my point in telling you this is that if you're a red teamer and you're looking for something super stealthy, you can devise it in NIM, and 9 times out of 10, if it's a Windows 10 machine or anything older than that, it's not going to be flagged. If you're a blue teamer, then you would know that if you see, if you're looking at a process that spawned and you see a NIM main function in there, that's suspicious, because how many people do you know are really doing things in NIM? Like there are no legitimate applications right now that are built using NIM, so I should probably take a look at that. But yeah, so
that's cool. So like with NIM, right? Because I'm not too familiar with the language. Is it like native, or do I have to like find a way to stage it or something like that?
No, it's completely native. So NIM is great because it has a Python-like syntax. So you also have automatic memory management, but the NIM compiler generates C code, and then from this intermediate C code, it generates native code. So you're getting a binary that is native to your target. Yeah, and you're getting all the benefits of C. So you're getting a tiny binary that's like going to be really tiny in size. You're getting the memory protection, and you're getting access to low-level things. So you could, in theory, you could literally write a device driver in NIM, and that's really scary, because if you can write device drivers, then you can write rootkits that interact directly with the kernel of an operating system. So in theory, I don't think it's been done yet, but yeah, it's really crazy. It's an OP language. It just doesn't seem like it should exist.
Yeah, that's kind of me with PowerShell.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like. Is this really a good idea, guys? we want to have C with Python syntax protections. Nah, yeah, that's a pretty bad idea. But yeah, I like Go for everything that I'm interested in. I like Go for everything, even despite the binary sizes.
Gotcha. And Go's by Google, right?
Yes, it is by Google. But yeah, so I've just been. I think one of the things that I'm going to experiment with for this particular project that I'm working on right now, I talked about the fact that Go binaries are usually large in size. I think what I'm going to try and do is look at using a different compiler for Go. So we have got 3 main compilers that are out there. You have standard compiler. You have GCC Go, which is a little bit more, it has a tighter connection with C programming language, and then of course you have TinyGo, which is initially designed for resource constrained systems, so like Arduino or like Raspberry Pi, like places where you don't really have a lot of memory. TinyGo is really good because it does produce really small binaries, much like you would get with NIM, but it doesn't have all the features of the standard library. So yeah, it just doesn't do everything you want out of the box.
Gotcha.
Yep. I can nerd out about malware all day long.
I'm totally with you.
You're getting into some stuff that like is way beyond what I'm at, but like it's awesome. Like it's awesome and scary at the same time, mostly because
it is.
It has its implementations in the security field for studying, but when you also realize we're using the same tools as the people who attack these networks, the things that we're defending against, like it's scary, and it kind of makes me want to dig into it more, so I can ensure that I'm the most knowledgeable I can be when it comes to defending against these sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a blue teamer and you have like process monitor, which is if you're a blue teamer, you don't have process monitor or something to look at like memory, looking at processes that have been spawned, and seeing like what dynamic link libraries they're loading into memory, what functions they're calling. You need that because for exactly the reasons that I just described, if someone was writing a malware in NIM and they sent it on your device and it was a fully featured malware where it did everything that like Interpreter could do and then some, you'd never know, right? Because like it's not going to be signatured by anything. It has the ability to do direct low-level system calls. So a whole bunch of different antivirus products would not even be able to detect it. And then the only way you would know is if you cracked open a process and you saw a NIM main, and then that should be your red flag to say, holy cow, how long has this been here and what the hell is it doing?
At that point, you're in disaster recovery. Like,
exactly.
How do we get in? What are we locking down?
Right. Now we need to look at all of the entire devices that are on the same network, and we have to look and see if they have any processes running that also say NIM main, and if they do, we need to shut them all down. But yeah.
You talked about this project being 90% done. Where do you see this project going afterwards? Are you planning on... I know it's publicly available for everybody and everybody can go read it, but are you planning on kind of making content covering over this? Are you planning on another project going on to something else? I mean, where do you see this going next? I guess what's the lifespan of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely see... one thing I definitely had briefly discussed with Cosmo is doing an integration with OnlyRat. So I could see a more advanced version of this being like maybe an adversary simulation where I'm going with an OnlyRat kill chain. Where like that will be the primary thing that I'm using as like my post exploitation tool. So I'd be using OnlyRat in place of like maybe Metasploit, talking about like what I'm noticing from the blue teamer side about like, well, what would I be seeing if I'm trying to do forensics? Like, how is it working? What do I need to target? And then from the OnlyRat side, as a red teamer, I want to, push the boundaries of what it can do. So I'd be interested in looking at, well, how can I extend OnlyRat? What would be the changes I would need to make so that it produces a different signature so that, it's not getting busted by Defender as soon as I put it on the target. So I can definitely, after I finish the initial write-up, I can go on with like an advanced simulation of using OnlyRat as the kill chain, and then talking about both the red and the blue team side of using that.
I'll try to see if I can make like an unobfuscated version and then send that to you so that way
Yeah.
save you a couple hours. Because I know some of that PowerShell is just going to be like a headache to read, but yeah, I got you. No, that's cool. That's cool.
The whole thing is just really cool. I mean, I would love to see, even afterwards, you going into that blue team side a little bit as well. If that's, I don't know how much of that is your area, kind of implementing on that as well.
Ooh.
I think so that would be cool.
If you, once you integrate it with OnlyRat, you should call it Mousetrap.
Ooh.
There it is.
There you go.
Heard it here first, guys.
Let me see Mousetrap.
Oh, Discord crashing.
Find as interesting is when you look at how malware tries to achieve what it achieves, you realize that antivirus is doing essentially the same thing, right? Like, so for your point about like the blue team side of things, if I'm trying to go again with custom tools, so here's one thing that I think is really interesting about how Windows works. So within Windows land, and it's different with Unix-based systems, but in Windows you have what are called security tokens, and basically the way Windows is set up, certain processes like Windows Defender, even if you have NT system authority privileges, you can't shut off Windows Defender. And the reason why you can is because even if you are NT System Authority and you run like task kill on the command line to try and shut down Defender, task kill process does not have the security tokens of system.
Right.
So the only way around this is you would need to find some way, well, not the only way, but one way around this is you need to find some way to manipulate the security tokens of Windows Defender or of task kill. So from a blue team perspective, right, one thing that I think would be really interesting is trying to devise a antivirus software that is not going to be subject to those sorts of attacks. Because if I'm a red teamer and I know what I'm doing, and I can simply unhook and sandbox all of the antivirus solutions with a tool like OnlyRat or with whatever custom tool, then there goes your antivirus, and there goes all of your solutions for protecting endpoints.
Yeah.
But if I'm devising an antivirus system and I know about that technique, right? Because we saw hey, this is a technique that's being used out in the wild, then I can build around that. And those sorts of things, I don't necessarily think that there's enough communication. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't think there's enough communication between the knowledge that red teamers have and the knowledge that blue teamers have to build solutions like what I'm talking about. So Mousetrap could be the first, it could be the first tool that we have that can hey, I see what you're trying to do with these security tokens. It's not going to work. I got you.
Yeah.
I definitely think you are right with the disconnect between the red team and blue team. I mean, just in my experience personally, there's a lot of distrust between the two when you look at it, because typically your red team comes in just during a security evaluation. Your blue team is hoping that they have patched everything, they've thought of everything they can. That is their enemy stepping through the door at that point. And the red team's looking at it as, this is my defense. That's over that hill of blue team is my gateway to being paid. And it kind of creates this conflict. I mean, and that's established, and I think that's where purple team kind of meets in the middle, where it's that nice, you hire your red teamers and stick with your blue teamers as a way to say, okay, well, I attack this, how would we defend against it? What would you recommend? How can we work to find a solution on that? And I think that's kind of cool to see this actually happening naturally now as well, with you're talking about with, potentially Mousetrap being that intro to it here. I'm pretty sure there's probably plenty of purple team examples in the wild and everything, but I think it's cool to kind of see the community starting to bridge towards that as well, taking that red teamer stuff and not just as, I'm going to use this for CTS or for bug bounties or, for security engagements, but how can we build a tool that's a good proof of concept, but we also defend against, so we're not releasing some big weapon into the wild.
Yeah, I mean, that's always kind of the fine line, right? Even with the example of Helga in the repository, I kind of scaled it back from the full implementation just because I didn't want something that somebody was just going to take in already with the kill chain, repository. You're already seeing very effective techniques that work in the wild. So, if I'm giving you a fully featured, especially something that people can't defend against, that doesn't have a signature yet, then that's not really good. So I definitely 100% agree that there needs to be more synergy around the knowledge that red teamers have and the blue teamers. I feel like a lot of time the blue teamers just aren't in the room when red teamers are devising the tools that they're devising, and it's great that we have because it's always going to be an arms race, right? It's always going to be the red teamers have every incentive to try and break security, and the blue teamers have every incentive to try and defend against it. I'm of the opinion, honestly, I really hope I'm wrong about this, but I'm of the opinion that with sufficient obfuscation, any defense can be overcome. And so, really, as a blue teamer, if I'm thinking from a blue team mindset, I want to cover the base. I want to cover as many bases as I can, like general bases. I want to make sure things like, very simple things. Like if I have a process monitoring solution in place that's looking at the processes that are running on a Windows machine, I'm looking out for things like a nim main function. I'm looking out for things like, well, why does this one process, why is it taking up so much space in memory? Little things like that, if I may not necessarily know too much about how to implement a particular tool, but if I understand that any NIM tool is going to have a NIM main, at least for the time being, if I know that any Go tool is going to be at least 8 megabytes or more, and I'm looking at a process like calculator, and calculator is like 64 megabytes. Little things like that, it just would automatically tell me as a blue teamer, like, something fishy's going on here.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It feels like this is also a real good look at it as like compare and contrast. Like you know what it should look like. You're talking about grab what's standard.
Yeah.
Now you start playing around with these methods. You see what does that look like? How does this differ from what's considered standard on the network? I mean, that has huge benefits all in itself. Knowing what the abnormal looks like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we need more from a blue teamer's perspective. There definitely has to be a lot of baselining and seeing what's normal on a particular endpoint. When I used to work at one particular company in question, they had a tool called Tachyon, and Tachyon was an endpoint monitoring tool, and basically it would provide snapshots. It would take snapshots of a particular computer, and at a given point in time, it would say like, okay, well, these are the processes that are running during a normal workday. This is what the memory usage is looking like. Here's what's normal for a person. And I guess if in the same way that I had like that one kind of like, in my opinion, from the red team perspective, that with sufficient obfuscation you can overcome anything, I guess the equivalent for blue team, in my opinion, would be rather than worrying about signatures of different tools and of different malware, what's normal on the device, what's normal on the network. If I'm not taking screenshots of that, if I'm not capturing that data and looking at that data, then I don't really stand a chance. Yeah, no problem. I don't really stand a chance if I don't know what's normal. Baselines are everything, man, from the blue team side.
Honestly, that's one of the hardest things about stepping into an environment like I have. I'm fairly new to my current position. I stepped into it, and it's been an actively running network that's had changes for the last 10, 12 years. I don't know what the baseline is. Like, I'm starting to get a feel for what it should be as I build out new computers and I'm able to test on, installing the default softwares and everything. What does this look like as it runs? But for the longest time, that was the hardest part, was trying to grab, what does this default look like? What does the, standard computer look like as it's functioning throughout the day?
Very true. Yeah, and I mean, like, that's exactly why the company that I worked at chose Tachyon, was because that was the vendor's problem, right? Like, and of course, like, we're not gonna be trying to like build out all of these custom solutions. If you went and you implemented by yourself a solution that could capture the state of a network and all the machines and what everything looks like in process, bro, you have a startup. Like, you don't only have a startup, you have a very valuable startup. But that was the whole reason why they went with Tachyon, was because the vendor provided that. So.
Dude, I'm totally gonna build that on stream. Only Rat already does have already has the screenshotting thing, and the capturing memory shouldn't be too hard. So.
Yeah, I think honestly that's a good idea.
It's like really cool. Like when you start getting into that territory, definitely like the actual security principles, like that sort of level of detail. It's almost like going down the blue team rabbit hole so deep that you start to wonder how you would secure this or how you're going to do that. You can really go down the rabbit hole for both sides, that red team, blue team side, and it's kind of cool. And when you were talking about that too, looking at what the default environment looks like, I also can't help but to wonder how much of that carries over to the red team side. Like when it comes to that masking, yeah, you can drop this in here and hope nobody notices, but whenever you plan for that sort of thing, like you talked about calculator, obviously calculator wouldn't run super heavy.
Mm-hmm.
When you would do that, would you also try to see what that environment looks like to see which application you would try to utilize and leverage in that capacity, something to hide it a little bit better? So, a couple of extra megabytes in.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fantastic question. Well, the whole idea with, especially when you're talking about an adversarial simulation, like kind of what I'm talking about, you have no information, right? So don't know what the baseline is going to be. You only know maybe the information that you gathered from doing some sort of like OSINT or doing some recon on services. But if you're devising some sort of some sort of tool or anything like that, you don't know. And that's the whole reason why you would deploy your initial stager. Like your initial stager is always going to be a throwaway, right? Like, so in if I were to bring it back to kind of the tools that we use within the channel, my goal would not be to try and get only rat like to run immediately. My goal would be I would create a throwaway, maybe like like NIM or Go,
Like off the shelf.
right? Or no, not necessarily off the shelf, because off the shelf will get signature,
Okay.
right? So I wouldn't just I wouldn't try to get an interpreter to run on there, because that's immediately going to get busted by antivirus. I would probably create like a lightweight or just a throwaway O binary or a NIM binary that will kind of do my recon for me. And then once I have done things like taking antivirus offline, then I'll bring only rat, then I'll bring interpreter onto the target. But when I'm designing those initial stagers, I don't really worry too much, because I have a whole entire company's worth of computers, right? So like if I'm doing a phishing campaign that has a malicious Word document attached to it, hitting thousands of targets. So even if the first 100 people get burned out of that, thousands of targets,
Yeah.
so some foothold is going to be established, and some recon information is going to come back. So that's how I would determine that baseline. So yeah, I mean.
But Monty, now you made me think of like a dynamic malware that would find like, it wouldn't just spread to like files, but it would like quote like search for the best files to spread itself to, if that makes sense. Like
That would be one hell of an implementation. So
You know what?
to go back to what
Yeah,
you
I'm
were
sorry,
talking about. No, well, go ahead. You go ahead and finish off what you're saying.
No. Well, what I was going to say is, so usually, and this is kind of like secret sauce stuff.
ooh.
So usually, my approach, and again, like I think we were talking about this a little bit before the stream began. A lot of antivirus and EDR solutions, they tend to be heavily signature based. So as long as your malware does not match a signature that they have already in their database, it'll run. So usually what I'll do is I'll create, like, I have a template, like kind of recon tool that I use, and that will be like kind of my first stage. And the only thing I usually do is just generate a new signature for it. So the question is, how do I generate a new signature for it? I use a lot of times I use Donut. Donut is a tool written by a security researcher named The Wolver. Check him out on GitHub. He has a very extensive write-up about how Donut works. But you can take a dynamic link library, you can take a portable executable, you can take a C# application. It can take any of those. And what Donut does is it will encrypt it and generate a new signature for it every single time. So you can take one template that works, and then just run it through Donut, throw it on a target, and boom, it has a different signature.
It almost sounds like the concept behind like the polymorphic engine within Worm's idea of changing the signature every time. That way, it can't be stopped in its tracks.
Exactly.
During
right.
that span as it goes through.
Same concept, yeah. So now how Donut does it is a bit magical, and I think my ability to explain within a short amount of time, but the point is that it works, right? So like in theory, you could take Meterpreter, throw it into Donut, it won't work, but you can take it into, because Meterpreter has Metasploit is completely open source, and Donut is also completely open source, and so Microsoft is going to painstaking lengths to try and signature a whole entire range of signatures that can be generated by Donut. So don't even try to think about doing this, good people out there on the internet. But you could, in theory, take a Meterpreter generated payload, obfuscate it enough, throw it into Donut so that it has a completely unique signature, and then throw it at a target, and it would probably work. Now, how much effort would go into obfuscating that? That's on you. But in theory, it would work. But yeah, what was your question just now?
Was it? I do have another question that kind of came up with that. Oh, I do remember the original question now, but I'll ask the first one, the one that just came up. Back in whenever I first started in this, and I was, watching YouTube videos on how to install Kali Linux, there was always this tool, I guess, at the time called Veil Evasion. The whole idea was,
yes.
So you know Veil Evasion, then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's the same concept, taking Metasploit payloads, kind of hiding them a little bit, to getting that obfuscation in there.
Yes.
So, would that obfuscate it enough to get past it, or do you think nowadays Veil Evasion's kind of been learned enough that there's really not too much?
Well, Veil Evasion it depends on what your goal is, right? So the reason why you would use something like Donut and the reason why you would use something like Veil Evasion are different. So if you have a particular interpreter shell or payload that you're trying to deliver on a target, you've already committed to the fact that you're going to be sending an executable onto the target that's saved on the disk. So that's why you would probably use Veil. I mean, Veil is definitely good. It does its job. The reason why you would use something like Donut is because you specifically want to generate shellcode that you're going to execute in some process. So what you could do is, so here's more secret sauce, right? So I'll take like a custom Go payload that I've written. Then I'll run it through Donut so that I have generated a binary file, right? And then from that binary file, I will pull out the bytes of that binary. And then from the bytes that I have out of that binary, I'll put that in, like, say, a C# application or something else. So the reason why I go that extra step is because now my malware is fileless, because I can use reflective DLL injection techniques and execute it in memory so that there is no file on the computer. Yeah. So
yeah,
this is getting to some next levels. I mean,
it is.
Like, how do you fight that? Because you're talking about it's all based on detection methods, on capturing those signatures. How do you
fight against that?
So,
okay, the good news is, for the blue teamers, if you are interested in blue teamer, it's not impossible to fight this. So, if you are dealing with, and again, these are techniques used by like the threat actors, like the really bad guys out there, and gals. So, the way you fight against this is that, as you notice, I said, like, I'm creating shellcode that's being executed by a C# application. The good thing about C# is that the .NET runtime captures all of the information of any .NET application. So it's very trivial for a blue teamer to just simply dump the memory of a .NET application, and they can see the source code of the malware. Now, what they will not be able to see, they'll see like they'll see the bytes of the like, I said that it would be like a Go payload that I deliver. They'll see those bytes, so they won't be able to get the original source code of that, but they will be able to see the .NET application and what APIs it's calling to load my shellcode into memory. And if a blue teamer knows the sequence of Windows API calls I'm using to load my shellcode into memory, it doesn't really matter what shellcode I'm trying to execute. They just will see, okay, this application is calling this API, and this API in that sequence. I'm going to immediately flag that and shut that down every single time.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason why that should be happening. So right there, just on that knowledge alone, you've shut down countless like super sophisticated types of malwares that could be executed. So then if I'm an attacker, I need to not commit to trying to execute a fileless malware. I have to try and commit to finding some way to write a malware that will live on the target, but that will have a sufficient signature that will not be detected by antivirus. So now I have to use a different set of techniques. Make sense?
It does.
Yeah, it's kind of like... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ford.
Yeah, no, I was just, I guess adding on, right? Like he's talking about like a lot of like these process injection techniques. And I kind of done that before. My best method of kind of avoiding it with like antivirus and stuff was usually like dynamically loading those like libraries and like APIs within the code, so that way when AV would like do its scans and such, they wouldn't pop up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of. Man. Let's get a little bit more nerdy, real quick. I'm
Oh,
going to
yeah.
take you guys real
Go
quick.
for it.
Let's
real
go.
quick
Let's
down
go.
I'm going to take you guys real quick down the rabbit hole, and then I'm going to take you guys right back out. So, to your point, Cosmo, for those of you who are new to like Windows-based malware, just bear with me, okay? So a lot of the malware that is like out there in the wild nowadays is going to try and do what are called system calls, and actually this is relevant to all operating systems. So basically the way that most operating systems work is you have what is called user space and you have what is called kernel space. User space is basically where your Microsoft Word is going to happen, where your Discord is going to live, and all that stuff. Kernel space is where like the operating system is like doing everything it needs to run your device. So like taking input from your keyboard and so on and so forth, turning the computer on and all that good stuff. So the whole reason why things are segmented into user space and kernel space is so that you cannot have process, program slash process means the same thing, that is created in user space that can interfere with the kernel, right? So a lot of what malware is trying to do is it's living in the user space and it's trying to access kernel space, right? And the way it does this is usually very specific on Windows. It'll call the kernel 32 dynamic link library, and that can, if you see that, like let's say you're a blue teamer and you have process monitoring in place, you can see processes and what DLLs or dynamic link libraries they have for a given process. You can see which ones are loaded. So if you see calculator, right, program that's running, and you look at the process memory and you see kernel 32 inside of that calculator process, that should immediately be a WTF moment. And to be fair, like a lot of blue teamers have caught on to this, and so like antivirus has caught up with these techniques, and so it's no longer enough for you as a red teamer to only use kernel 32 for stuff. So let's take it a little bit further down the rabbit hole. So how did hackers get around this? Well, they said, what is kernel 32 doing? Kernel 32 is calling NTDLL. NTDLL is a dynamic link library that sits on the edge of both user space and kernel space. So whenever you are trying to make a low-level system call, NTDLL is the one that's actually taking your data from user space and putting it into the kernel space and requesting services from the kernel. So what hackers said was, okay, well, what if we just try and use NTDLL? And again, blue teamers would see like calculator process pop up and then it's calling NTDLL. So then that should be, as a blue teamer, you should say to yourself, why the hell is this calculator calling NTDLL, and why is it trying to allocate? Say it again.
It's quantum. That's how it is.
Right. So why is this calculator trying to allocate memory in kernel space? That should not be happening. So like, so like there's that. But my point in saying all this is that's essentially how a lot of the low level techniques, and the reason why you need to use like say kernel 32 DLL and the reason why you need to use NTDLL for your malware is because to do any of the interesting things like reading keystrokes for a keylogger, you're going to have to use those dynamic link libraries.
Yeah. That's what the PowerShell keylogger uses.
Right. You can't get around that. So because you can't get around making certain system calls to do things with your malware, as a blue teamer, you can rely on the fact that I don't necessarily need to know what language this is written in. I just need to pay attention to what Windows 32 APIs are being called and what dynamic link libraries are being loaded into memory for a specific process. And then right there, if you're a blue teamer and you have just that base knowledge alone, and you have the ability to pull up process monitor and look at different processes and say, hey, why the hell is this calculator calling NTDLL? It should not be happening. You are already like 100% on your game. And like, as a blue teamer, you don't need to know the fact that my malware was written in Go or in Python or in Java. You know, like, you just know that this shouldn't be happening. So I'm going to pay attention to this.
That's awesome. That honestly is. This is why I like getting into these situations. I think that's why this whole dynamic with this podcast works so well. Is that I like to sit on that blue team side. That's where I'm at. I haven't, I know a little bit on the red team side just because everybody who starts out in the security field starts out with the same basic courses. Learn how to hack this web app, learn how to use this tool, learn how to use that tool. But I've really spanned into the blue team side, and I feel like Cosmos gone the opposite direction. It's kind of cool to combine that information and see, how it's being built and how these things actually are affecting, the way things are going. And that's one of the things that we have conversations about quite often when I'm talking with Cosmo. He'll talk to me, before streams or after streams and tell me, oh, we did this feature. And there's sometimes I'll look at that and just think it is so amazing. And then there's other times I'm looking at it and thinking, dear God, how would I ever defend against this? How do I start?
You defend against it. You can definitely defend against it.
Hearing this now, there definitely is more light at the end of the tunnel than previously, if you would have asked me. It's really interesting.
Always stop it. Because, every malware is going to want to do specific things. Like, no matter what language it's written in, it's going to need to make some system call. So at some point. So like, as long as you're monitoring those system calls, you're monitoring those underlying Windows 32 API calls, and you know what to look for, i.e., like I said, looking at processes that are loading kernel 32 into memory, looking at processes that are loading NTDLL into memory. If you know what to look for, then it doesn't really matter. Like, somebody could write something in freaking assembly language and you'd still be able to catch it as a blue teamer. So
yeah, my only concern with this is that, like, if the malware were to allocate itself into a process that does typically use those libraries,
then you're
if there's like a code cave or like anything like that.
I'm glad you brought that up. So
code caves.
So remember how we talked a little bit about the fact that you can essentially shut off antivirus programs by messing with their security tokens.
Yeah.
The same concept can apply. So like, you can essentially manipulate the security tokens of actual legitimate Windows processes, and then you can allocate memory inside of those processes, and then put your shellcode or put your malware into those processes. Sometimes you don't even really need to do that. The reason why you would mess around with the security tokens is if you are trying to access a high integrity process. But there are some processes that exist within user space,
right?
Basic applications that may load kernel 32 and NTDLL into memory. And you can use a technique called process hollowing, where basically, if I had to explain it really briefly, let's say I'm a hacker, evil hacker man, and then I spawn a notepad process. And then when I spawn the notepad process, I spawn it in suspended state. So when it pops up, it just doesn't do anything. And then I remove all of the contents of the program, like all of the memory. I deallocate all the memory inside of it so that basically it's just an empty shell. And then I put all my malware code inside of that notepad process.
That's
and then
terrifying.
I start.
Yeah.
It's really terrifying. It's really hard to catch. It's really hard to catch. So if I can process hollow in inside of a process that is trusted, like Service Host, for example, which is on every Windows machine, usually it's not locked down. So like I can process hollow into, or even without even process hollowing, I can like execute. I can just have instruct the kernel to allocate memory inside of that process and then call my shellcode. How are you going to catch that, right? Like, you have to really, really be on your game, looking at like taking regular snapshots of memory for a target and seeing stuff that's suspicious and looking for discrepancies to catch that. But yeah, that would be very difficult to catch.
That is crazy. There was one question that I wanted to ask earlier, and I want to loop back before you get too far down this rabbit hole. You brought up the idea of not wanting to throw something like only rat out as soon as you get there. Talk about using lower level applications. Kind of quick on the spot typed generated stuff. Would that be because the idea of putting something like only rat that's so heavily crafted being easier for it to be detected, would that be the reason? You don't want to throw kind of your best bait out when you first get there?
That is exactly the reason. Yeah. Okay. So if I have spent all this time building a perfect post-exploitation tool that records video, like does captures a screen, keylogs, does everything I wanted to do to take remote control over a computer, and the minute I throw it down on a target, despite all of my best effort, it immediately gets busted by Windows Defender. And now Windows Defender has signatured it and put it in the cloud and shared it with all the AV vendors. There goes OnlyRat. So what I want to do is I want to throw down like a low stakes malware, a template kind of malware that will maybe like look at what defenses are in place, and then maybe that same malware may try and like turn off the antivirus that's on the target, maybe, or maybe it might just call another malware to do that. Like OnlyRat is going to be like after I'm certain I have a nice clean work surface.
Yeah.
So.
I think what I can also clarify on the OnlyRat side is that with OnlyRat, right, as of right now, there's only one installer, but in the roadmap, I talk about how we're going to add different installers, things like USB rubber ducky, bash bunny, malware shortcutting, and then I also have a listener option, almost like almost like a reverse shell. How you can have like a listener, right, and wait for that connection and such. So hopefully that can, on the malware side, help avoid with like that signature such. But
yeah, absolutely.
So. Would you also recommend, like you talked about these quick build applications, almost quartering off OnlyRat, where you take, this particular feature of OnlyRat, test it to see if it runs, and then, pull another piece, test it to see how it runs, and if that specific thing gets captured, you would say, hey, let's not put OnlyRat in there. It basically would be a way of testing the things you want to accomplish with OnlyRat in total without actually burning everything altogether. Would that be a strategy as well, if you were in that attacker mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be. I'm a huge fan of modular components anyway. So, like, the only thing about that approach is that you have to be mindful of, from the network perspective. So, if for example, I have everything, let's say in GitHub, right, and it's a device, depending on how, which particular, company or whatever you're working with, if they're really paying attention, and there are some companies that do this, to what sites are normally accessed, and let's say you hit a device that's in the accounting department, right, with your OnlyRat stage 1, and then it's pulling down stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and so on, and it's reaching out to GitHub, or it's reaching out to Discord or Slack or wherever. Anything that's atypical on the network side, and I will give props to network people for this. They are usually very, very strict about network blue teamers, about paying attention to network activity. If it's not normal for this accounting machine to be reaching out to GitHub, that's immediately going to get some eyes on it. So you do have to kind of think about that when you're devising something. But if you've done enough recon, right, if you know that the particular device, or if you're spear phishing, right, and you know that the person that you're spear phishing uses Slack for their communications, and you serve your malware on Slack, then what hope do the blue teamers have to catch them?
We got hit with a similar attack like that just recently. The last podcast episode, my hospital got hit with something very, very similar.
Yeah.
It was quite amazing, because when we first saw the attack, it seemed very simplistic on surface until you actually looked at the history of it. And you saw, like, so the way this whole attack came down was a person that we'd very commonly share emails with and shared this different data with. They had been attacked through a phishing email. And the way the fish came across to them was, hey, download this invoice, this, that, and the third, and then suddenly it popped up and said, hey, Windows popped up with this dialogue saying, hey, we're trying to, run this, but we need your credentials for admin level. And she didn't question it.
Yeah.
But when we got hit with that fish, it was utilizing a phishing email based off of Office 365 secure file transfer. And just seeing how different it was, that this was clearly the same attacker, because it was within 24 hours they'd already started attacking our organization with these compromised credentials. Seeing how they put in the time, and the other thing that was so cool about it was they didn't just send one blanket email utilizing an attack platform that was known to be used. They also customized these emails where people who work in finance got emails relating to finance and payroll. People who worked in maintenance got, project updates, stuff like that. And like seeing that they actually took the time not only to figure out a platform we use, but to see what the people who they were sending it to, what they communicated about.
There's this great quote that I love. This guy who worked for the NSA. I don't remember his name. I might butcher his quote, but I'm going to do my best to recall it. But he says basically like, why are the bad guys so good? It's because they know our systems better than we do. And like that whole recon phase, I would never even attempt to run a penetration test or anything without thoroughly doing recon. And recon is not only doing network recon, it's also doing OSINT. Because it just takes one
That's
weak link.
valid.
And I mean, not even 1 weak link, because I don't want to make it seem as if people are not being professionals, because they are, but it just takes one mistake.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes one mistake, and then there's another guy who says this, like attackers always have the advantage because companies are just too big. There's just too much to defend, and there's too many moving pieces. So somewhere, some way, some mistake is going to happen. So just keeping that in mind as from an attacker's perspective and from a defender's perspective, you really do have to just think about these things and accept the fact that certain risks are going to happen. Like, we have to accept the fact that eventually someone's going to find a way into the network, and how do we respond to that? That's what's most important. But yeah, like as an attacker, personally, I don't even attempt to do anything unless I've done extensive recon. I usually will start with OSINT first, and then once I have like a good understanding from an OSINT perspective, I will then begin to do like maybe network recon, network probing. And then if I can't break into your web app, then I'm going to probably try and do a spear phishing campaign.
Right.
That's wow. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
To be honest, like,
I really appreciate the time, guys.
No, like, I'm glad that you came in. I know you kind of went over what you said you could. I felt bad that we've kept you longer than we kind of said we were going to. But, we would definitely love to see, as more work gets done on your program, and, on your kill chain as you continue going, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, keep us posted.
Like, we'd love to have you back.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
I think this has been one of the most in the weeds, down the rabbit hole geeky talks that we've had yet, and I feel like this has been awesome. Like, we've talked about, inspiring people and, where to learn and everything, but I think this is the first time we've really gotten on a technical level this deep.
Yeah. Like, this episode had like a kind of prerequisite of understanding.
Yes, I'm sorry. I hope I didn't scare anyone.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's like we have a lot of episodes already reaching out to beginner audiences. We're obviously going to have like episodes that reach out to like a different like level of understanding for an audience. But I think it is like super important to like deep dive into these topics, kind of like explore them, clarify them, and even like us, like we all have our own skill sets, right? You know, you and I are very versed in malware. Monty's very versed in like networking. Like if Monty can go a whole tangent on networking, I'll be asking the same types of questions he was asking you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Like there's cybersecurity is such a huge domain of just like knowledge, right? And you can be well versed in malware, but know jack shit about forensics or like
Exactly, yeah.
So it's always cool to hear like even people who are maybe very versed in like certain areas get to learn about new areas. And that's kind of like what this episode is kind of like exploring, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But,
Definitely. I mean, and to anyone out there that's listening and is like, what is this guy talking about? Like, this is so like super overwhelming. I am pretty active in the Discord, so if
Yeah,
there's
join the
specific
Discord.
questions you have, like definitely join the Discord, reach out to me. I'm not, like super elite hacker must make you feel bad. At one point, I was, like I was a beginner. I was exactly where some of you guys and girls are right now. Like, This is literally coming from years of experience, of just like years of just working and learning and asking questions and having good mentors. And if you're out there and you don't know where to start, or you feel like you listen to a talk like this and you just feel overwhelmed, don't feel overwhelmed, because this is not like flexing knowledge. This is like just a process of learning. And that's why I'm sure that's the reason why Cosmo put out Only Red. That's the reason why I put out the Kill Chain. It's to get you guys to be able to learn and to understand these techniques in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And to have the support that you need to learn this stuff, because I know I didn't, when I was getting started, I didn't have support that I have now. So
it's a different ballgame. I think it's nice that you're correct in that whole lack of support and kind of the right environments to be in. It feels like once you hit a certain level and you get to a certain place, a lot of things tend to open up, and I think it's cool to see people opening up more of that lower level stuff. And give people those environments so that way they can get to that next step and keep people interested. I mean, Cosmo's story was people making fun of him by telling him to learn BS languages. I mean,
and the next thing you know, I'm a malware developer. So
exactly. It's just so cool to see stuff like this. And if you ever have updates and everything, you want to jump back on here, by all means. And that goes out to anybody's listening. If you've got
we
something
totally
you wanna
advocate
share
that.
with people, like, get in here. We would love to give you the time just to go on your spill and tell everybody. I mean, that's what this is for.
Yeah.
It's for us to talk, share knowledge, and not just this particular segment of Cosmodium, but the entire point of Cosmodium is to share that information from people who learned it through, not just picking up, a beginner's course and doing that, just from being in this industry for so long, showing you what could be, what you can do if you put in the time.
Mm.
I'll tell you one thing for anyone who's super interested in Only Rats. When I have time, and I'm working on it, guys. Trust me, I'm working on it. I have a huge workload at work. But when I have time, one thing that I really want to add to Only Rat is I want to add the ability to embed an Iron Python interpreter into Only Rat.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
The advantage of being able to do that is, so before I explain the advantage of being able to do that, I'm going to give you a very, very simplistic breakdown of how .NET works. And it's very simple. Basically, when you write C# code, it gets converted into what is called bytecode, right? And then your bytecode is basically like, just, you can think of it as kind of like an assembly language for the .NET runtime, which is what is taking your code that you've written in C# and it's translating it into something that your actual physical machine can understand. Now, the reason why this is important is because there are many different languages, such as Ruby, Python, and there's even a language called Boo. That all you can write them in, like Python, Ruby, or Boo, and you can run them. And even Lua is another language. You can convert the code that you write in language X, such as Lua, Boo, Python, and it can convert into .NET bytecode. So this is great because if you are a person who wants to be able to do the things that .NET can do from an attacker's perspective, but you don't know C# or you're not comfortable with it, but you are comfortable with Python, you can actually do everything that .NET can do by using Iron Python, which is essentially, you can write your code in Python, in the Python version 2 syntax, and then it can be converted into .NET bytecode, and then it can run. And that's really powerful because .NET is hugely popular by malware developers and attackers. Like, .NET can do everything you want from a malware perspective, and the fact that you can use Python to do all those things is fantastic.
Oh, just having the Python there as a whole, just on its own, is just like insane.
It's crazy.
It's
Python's
powerful.
really powerful, but always the limitation of using regular Python is that you need an interpreter on the target.
Yeah.
With what we're talking about, using Iron Python, which compiles to .NET bytecode, you don't need to have a Python interpreter on the target
at all. Yeah.
Because the .NET runtime is installed on every Windows machine.
It's like making Python native.
Exactly. So now again, you get the limitations of .NET, which from a blue team perspective is very easy to get that source code back. But from attacker's perspective, you can do everything you want in Python. If you are interested in seeing like what's possible with using, not necessarily Iron Python specifically, but Blue language, which is similar, you should look into a framework called Silent Trinity, which takes the concept of what I just described, using a third-party language called Blue, converting that code into .NET bytecode, and writing all of your payloads in Blue programming language instead of writing it in C#, and getting the benefits of using the .NET framework for all your malware. So if OnlyRat has this Iron Python interpreter, that means everyone who does Python can write all of their payloads in Python and run it on top of OnlyRats and do all the devious, diabolical stuff that we want to do, like dumping passwords and like screenshots and all the evil stuff and stealing passwords and keylogging and all that good stuff. So that's something I'm gonna add when I have time to OnlyRat. Just give me some time, guys.
You're totally fine.
You're good. You're good.
I mean, I'm still working on it too. I'm still adding like installers. Right now we have keylogging, screenshot capture, and the webcam capture as well. So that was fun. I use fun in like asterisks or quotes because it was just a headache for a 4-hour headache basically for each module. But
I mean, you've seen the memes. I hate programming. It works. I love programming.
Right.
I mean,
I added a new line. I hate programming again.
I mean, all right, guys. I don't think I have too much longer, but definitely got to get cracking on for tomorrow. But I appreciate you guys giving me the time.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure, man. I think that about wraps it up here for us too. Cosmo, we're going to continue on anything else, or is this really it?
No, just friendly reminder. If you guys want to support us in our mission to support you, definitely check out the Happy Hacker site plan. It is pinned in the chat. It's only $1 a month. We're not asking for much, but you guys get exclusive access to articles, videos, courses, as well as our knowledge base. So if you guys want to check that out, make sure you guys do. Otherwise, I think we're going to end it here. Appreciate you guys for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, do the whole 9, right? YouTube algorithm things. And so stay happy, stay positive, and as always, happy hacking.
See you guys.
Hack the planet.